For the first time, the United States has carried out a military-style attack inside Venezuelan territory. The breach occurred at 4:47 a.m. A reinforced steel door engineered to withstand explosives, small arms fire, and everything short of a bunker buster was peeled open like a tin can by a precisely placed shaped charge. The breacher was an FBI hostage rescue team operator. The blast echoed through subterranean corridors beneath the presidential palace in Caracas, sending shockwaves through the foundations of Venezuela's center of power. What lay beyond that door would provide the final irrefutable proof of what investigators had suspected for years. The Venezuelan government was not merely complicit in narcotics trafficking. It was operating as the logistical backbone of one of the largest cocaine distribution networks in the Western Hemisphere. 30 tons of high, purity cocaine hidden beneath the seat of government marked the largest drug seizure in Latin American history. But the drugs were only the beginning. What federal and military intelligence teams uncovered below would expose how a failed state was transformed into a fully operational narco state, and how a coordinated U.S. task force dismantled that empire in a single synchronized strike at 4:47 a.m. beneath the fortified grounds of Miraflores Palace, Caracas. The war began with a single controlled explosion. A reinforced steel door engineered to withstand small arms fire and military reblasts was torn open by a shaped charge placed with surgical precision. The breacher belonged to the FBI, operating shoulder to shoulder with DEA tactical elements. The blast thundered through subterranean corridors, rattling marble floors above where Venezuela's political elite slept. Dust, smoke, and concrete fragments filled the air as assault teams surged forward, weapons raised. Lights cutting through darkness. This was not a routine raid. Overhead, encrypted comms crackled as Delta Force commanders coordinated movements across the capital, while CIA analysts monitored live feeds from satellites and drones. Every second mattered. Every step forward carried the weight of years of intelligence and the certainty that what lay ahead was not just contraband, but proof of a nation turned into a battlefield. If you're still watching, tap like now. What you're about to see goes far beyond a single raid. What waited beyond the breached corridor was not a cache, but a revelation. As teams moved deeper beneath Miraflores Palace, Caracas, tactical lights swept across towering metal shelving, brick after brick, kilogram after kilogram. Cocaine sealed, stamped, and stacked with industrial precision, inventoried like state property. Initial counts stunned even veteran agents. 15,000 declar of high-purity cocaine concealed directly beneath the seat of government. This was no rogue stockpile. DEA chemists confirmed purity levels exceeding 92%, consistent with export-grade shipments bound for international markets. FBI evidence teams documented every stack in place, while CIA analysts cross-referenced serial markings with years of intercepted traffic. The conclusion formed instantly and unanimously. This operation required state authority, military protection, and sovereign control of ports, airspace, and borders. Above ground, Caracas remained silent. Below, the myth collapsed. 30 tons of cocaine did not represent profit alone. It represented months of coordinated production, thousands of acres under cultivation, and a logistics network capable of moving hundreds of tons annually without interference. U.S. prosecutors would later allege that for decades, elements of the Venezuelan regime collaborated with major trafficking networks to move cocaine toward the United States and other markets, enriching officials while shielding smuggling corridors. Intelligence assessment suggested that hundreds of tons transited Venezuelan routes each year through Caribbean and Central American hubs. In that moment, the investigation crossed a threshold. Venezuela was no longer suspected of complicity. It stood exposed as a fully operational narco state, built into the very foundations of its own presidential palace, 30 tons beneath a presidential palace. Comment expose if you believe this could not exist without state power. By the time the scale of the discovery was confirmed, the operation had already shifted from law enforcement to full-spectrum warfare. Across secure command channels, Delta Force assumed tactical command, integrating assault timelines with precision down to the minute. Navy SEALs and Marine Raiders established maritime and aerial overwatch, sealing escape routes from the coast to the interior. This was the moment years of intelligence converged. CIA fed live satellite imagery, signals, intercepts, and long-buried human intelligence into a single operational picture. DEA mapped trafficking corridors capable of moving 300 tons of cocaine annually, while FBI identified command nodes embedded inside government ministries and military units. Caracas was no longer a city. It was a battlefield grid. Red markers spread across the map. Ports, mansions, warehouses, financial hubs, each one a pressure point in a criminal state. When the order moved down the chain, it carried absolute clarity. This was not about arrests. It was about dismantling an empire in one synchronized strike. At 2:32 a.m., the silence over Caracas shattered. Strike teams moved simultaneously across 6 high-value locations timed to the second. In Savannah, Grande, flashbangs ignited narrow corridors as agents forced entry into a fortified mansion tied to the regime's inner circle. Doors splintered, shadows ran. Within minutes, 2.3 tons of cocaine and $18 million in cash were secured as suspects scattered into courtyards and alleyways. Across the city in Altamira, another team stormed a luxury penthouse overlooking the avenue. Resistance was brief, but violent. Gunfire cracked, glass rained down, and armored shields absorbed the first chaotic seconds. FBI operators cleared room by room, while DEA secured evidence nodes marked months earlier by intelligence. By 2:46 a.m., 6 targets were under control. Sirens wailed in the distance, masking the final movements. Caracas didn't wake up to a raid. It woke up to the realization that its power structure was under assault everywhere at once. 6 strikes, 1 city. If you're still watching, comment watching below. Just after 3:10 a.m., the battle shifted to the industrial port zone of La Guaira, Venezuela's primary maritime artery. Floodlights snapped on as armored vehicles boxed in a warehouse complex registered under a Shell agricultural exporter. The first breach met resistance. Automatic fire ripped through corrugated steel, forcing assault teams to advance behind ballistic shields. Within seconds, flashbangs detonated, collapsing the defense. Inside, the scale was staggering. 4.1 tons of cocaine, heat sealed and stamped with cartel insignia, were stacked behind crates labeled as coffee shipments bound for Europe. DEA agents secured the narcotics while FBI teams detained port officials attempting to destroy shipping manifests. Offshore Navy SEALs maintained overwatch, intercepting a cargo vessel already warming its engines for departure. By 3:28 a.m., the docks were locked down. La Guaira, once the regime's safest exit route, had become a sealed battlefield, cutting a major artery from a narco empire in mid-flight. At 4:02 a.m., the operation reached its most dangerous phase. MH-60 helicopters knifed through the darkness above Miraflores Palace, Caracas, rotors thundering low as ropes dropped onto the rooftop. Delta Force operators slid down in seconds, weapons up, moving with rehearsed precision. Below them lay layers of security once thought untouchable. Gunfire cracked across the upper floors as guards scrambled from their posts. The response was brief and chaotic. Hallways filled with smoke and shouts as teams cleared room by room, driving forward under strict time pressure. From offshore, Marine raiders provided overwatch while Navy SEALs sealed maritime escape routes, ensuring no extraction was possible beyond the palace walls. Within minutes, resistance collapsed. By 4:11 a.m., the private quarters were secured. The head of state and his wife were removed under heavy guard, transferred immediately to a U.S. Navy vessel waiting offshore. Above ground, the palace was silent again, but beneath its marble floors, intelligence teams knew something remained hidden, something that would turn a successful capture into a historic takedown. This is where everything changes. If you want the full truth, do not skip the next chapter. With the palace secured above ground, the operation entered its most consequential phase. At 4:26 a.m., a specialized evidence and security element moved inward through the interior corridors of Miraflores Palace, Caracas. The sounds of gunfire and rotor wash had faded, replaced by an unnatural stillness. Marble floors reflected tactical lights. Gilded portraits stared back from the walls. Silent banquet halls, spaces built to project permanence and authority, now stood empty, stripped of meaning. This time, the objective was not a person. It was something far more elusive, a rumor, a theory, a fragment of intelligence that had circulated quietly for years through classified channels, a hidden facility buried directly beneath the palace itself. The team advanced deliberately. Veteran DEA supervisors led the movement, flanked by FBI forensic technicians and shielded by a tight inner cordon of Marine raiders. Every step was measured, every hallway cleared twice. Intelligence from the CIA had narrowed the search to a service corridor adjacent to the palace kitchens, an area deliberately designed to appear mundane, forgettable, beneath notice. Shelves lined the walls, canned goods, bottled water, cleaning supplies stacked in neat, ordinary rows. The kind of room no one questions. No guards posted, no cameras visible, nothing out of place, nothing suspicious to the naked eye, but technology told a different story. An FBI technician knelt near the northern wall and powered up a portable ground-penetrating radar unit. As the scanner passed slowly across the concrete, the screen flickered, then stabilized on a result that changed the atmosphere in the room instantly. A void, a large, unmistakable void space where solid concrete should have been. The room fell silent. This was no basement. The anomaly extended far deeper than any architectural plans for the palace allowed. What had been speculation seconds earlier now became certainty. Someone had carved space beneath the seat of power and gone to extraordinary lengths to hide it. At 4:34 a.m., agents began carefully exposing the surface. The wall, when examined up close, revealed subtle inconsistencies, reinforced concrete textured and painted to perfectly mimic surrounding cinder blocks. It was a false wall engineered not just to conceal, but to deceive. Behind it sat a sealed steel access door, thick, reinforced, and industrial in design. Its locking mechanism bore no resemblance to ordinary security hardware. This was a vault-grade system. Attempts at manual bypass failed. The lock was powered, shielded, and tied into an independent electrical circuit. Even in total power loss, it would remain sealed. This was not improvisation. This was intentional. This door had been designed to survive chaos, coups, riots, even direct assault. An FBI technical operations specialist moved forward and attached a bypass device to the control panel. Wires were connected, signals tested. For several long seconds, nothing happened. Then, with a muted mechanical sound that seemed almost too quiet for its significance, the lock disengaged. Beyond the threshold, a stairwell descended sharply into darkness. Measurements taken later would confirm the drop 40 FT below ground level. The walls were reinforced with steel rebar. Emergency lighting strips lined the descent, powered by battery backup systems, completely independent from the palace above. Air circulation vents hummed softly, feeding fresh air into the depths. Every design choice reflected long-term planning and millions of dollars in investment. At the bottom of the stairs stood a second door. This one was unmistakable. Blast-resistant military RA, rated to withstand high explosive shock waves. There would be no quiet entry, no bypass, no alternative route. At 4:49 a.m., a shaped charge was placed. The detonation echoed upward through the palace foundations, a concussive roar that rattled chandeliers and sent vibrations rippling through marble halls above. When the smoke cleared, the door sagged open, its locking bolts sheared. Caracas becomes a battlefield clean, steel warped by force. The entry team pushed through. What emerged from the darkness defied scale. The bunkers stretched out before them, approximately 5,000 square feet, segmented into multiple chambers by thick concrete. Walls, industrial shelving units rose nearly to the ceiling, packed tightly with uniform stacks, not bags, not bundles. Bricks, kilogram bricks of cocaine wrapped, sealed, and arranged with warehouse-level precision. Initial visual estimates suggested tens of thousands of kikai before formal counting even began. Tactical lights swept slowly across the chamber as agents moved between the rows, their pace almost reverent. The air was cool, dry, precisely regulated. Industrial filtration systems hummed steadily in the background. Temperature and humidity were tightly controlled, optimized not for people, but for product preservation. This was not a hiding place. It was a permanent facility, engineered, financed, maintained, protected, a space designed to operate indefinitely beneath the highest office of the state. In that moment, the operation crossed a final, irreversible line. The palace above no longer mattered. The men in custody upstairs no longer mattered. Titles, offices, uniforms, none of it mattered anymore. 40 FT beneath the throne lay the physical infrastructure of a narco state, embedded directly into the foundations of government itself. It had waited there for years, silent, invisible, untouchable, until now. Under the harsh white glare of federal lights, the illusion collapsed completely. Power had not merely been corrupted. It had been built on top of this place, layer by layer, until the line between state and cartel disappeared entirely. And standing in the center of that bunker, surrounded by the bricks that told the real story, every person present understood the same truth. This was no longer an investigation. It was evidence of a regime exposed at its deepest level. Once the bunker was secured, the tempo shifted from shock to methodical exposure. At 5:07 a.m., teams began the slow, disciplined work of documentation inside the underground chambers beneath Miraflores Palace, Caracas. Every movement was deliberate. Nothing was touched before it was photographed. Nothing was removed before it was logged. This was no longer a battlefield. It was a crime scene of historic scale. Along the perimeter walls, investigators identified the infrastructure first. Industrial-grade hydraulic presses capable of compressing 100-kilo loads. Vacuum sealing machines designed for maritime transport. Precision digital scales calibrated far beyond street-level needs. Chemical supplies, acetone, ether, hydrochloric acid stored in quantities consistent with large-scale processing, not storage. The conclusion was unavoidable. This facility had not merely held cocaine, it had actively processed and packaged it. As DEA specialists moved deeper, they discovered a secured side chamber containing metal filing cabinets and reinforced lockers. Inside were spiral-bound notebooks, physical ledgers deliberately chosen over digital records, page after page of handwritten entries filled with dates, weights, destination codes, and payment figures. Initial review showed entries spanning July through December 2024, documenting more than 200 individual shipments. Each line represented loads ranging from 50 to 500 kilos, routed through coded destinations, tied to ports across the Caribbean and Central America. Analysts would later estimate that those 6 months alone accounted for over 40 tons of cocaine generating transaction values exceeding $800 million. These were not projections. They were records written, organized, and maintained with bureaucratic precision. Nearby, FBI cyber specialists powered up a desktop computer left running in an office alcove within the bunker. Password protections were bypassed in minutes. What surfaced on the hard drive transformed suspicion into certainty. Email chains linked Venezuelan military officers with cartel intermediaries. Spreadsheets detailed profit splits down to exact percentages. Scanned bank. Transfer receipts traced funds moving through offshore accounts in Panama, the British Virgin Islands, and Cyprus. Then came the video files. Security footage from inside the bunker showed uniformed officials overseeing packaging operations. Men in military dress inspected bricks, supervised weighing, and approved shipment loads. In one clip dated November 12, 2024, a senior officer could be seen walking the floor, issuing instructions as if touring a government warehouse. There was no secrecy in their behavior, no fear of exposure. The bunker had been treated as sovereign space. As the files were cross-referenced, CIA analysts matched names, faces, and voices to years of intercepted communications. What had once been fragments, partial signals, incomplete human reports, now aligned into a single coherent structure. This was not corruption at the margins. This was command-level coordination planned and executed from the top down. In the final chamber, investigators uncovered something even more telling. Administrative correspondence authorizing shipments through military-controlled ports without inspection. Digital signatures tied approvals directly to the highest offices of the state. The paperwork read like routine governance. Formal language, stamped authorizations, distribution memos, only the cargo made it extraordinary. By 6:01 a.m., the picture was complete. The bunker was not an anomaly. It was the central node of a national enterprise embedded beneath the presidential palace to ensure absolute protection. Above-ground power had worn suits and uniforms. Below ground, it had kept ledgers, balances, and schedules, and together they revealed a government that had not been infiltrated by crime, but rebuilt around it. By the time the bunker's contents were fully cataloged, the operation had already expanded far beyond Caracas. At 6:18 a.m., inside a secure command center offshore, a massive digital map flickered to life. Red markers bloomed across the screen, each one representing a cartel asset, a processing site, a laundering front, or a compromised official. What had begun beneath a single palace was now exposed as a hemispheric system. Within Venezuela alone, analysts identified 47 primary targets, but the network did not respect borders. DEA intelligence traced outbound routes through Panama and the 40 feet below the throne, the hidden bunker Dominican Republic, while CIA confirmed financial nodes stretching into Central America and Europe. The order moved quickly. This was the moment to strike before the shockwave dissipated. In Marabou, just after 7 a.m., assault teams backed by armored vehicles stormed an industrial park hiding a cocaine superlab. The facility was producing paste at a rate exceeding 200 kilos per week. Agents seized 3.7 tons of cocaine, thousands of liters of precursor chemicals, and arrested 22 cartel operators attempting to flee through rear service tunnels. Minutes later in Valencia, a convoy of armored SUVs linked to cartel enforcement units was intercepted on a coastal highway. Gunfire erupted as drivers attempted to break through the cordon. The exchange lasted less than 3 minutes. Inside the vehicles, agents recovered 1.1 tons of cocaine, $4.3 million in cash, and an arsenal that included assault rifles and fragmentation grenades. At Puerto Cabo, Venezuela's most critical port, Navy SEALs boarded a foreign-flagged cargo vessel already loaded for departure. Hidden behind crates marked as agricultural machinery were 6.8 tons of cocaine bound for Europe. Simultaneously, Marine raiders secured the dock facilities, preventing any secondary extraction attempts. Further inland near the Colombian border, teams uncovered a network of reinforced underground tunnels complete with ventilation, lighting, and electric transport carts. Intelligence confirmed the tunnels had been operational for at least 5 years, moving cocaine, weapons, and migrants under military protection. At the terminus of one tunnel, agents breached a fortified compound used for human trafficking. 17 hostages were rescued. 9 cartel operatives were taken into custody. By midday, the cumulative numbers were staggering. Across multiple cities and ports, the operation had seized over 27 tons of cocaine, $89 million in cash, and hundreds of weapons while arresting more than 100 individuals directly tied to the regime's narcotics infrastructure. But the scope widened further. FBI and financial investigators followed the money outward into shell companies in Panama, laundering hubs in the Dominican Republic, logistics corridors through Honduras and Guatemala, and distribution cells operating inside the United States, Miami, Houston, New York, Los Angeles. Each location surfaced as another pressure point in the same system. By nightfall, the conclusion was unavoidable. This was not a Venezuelan crisis. It was a continental one. The narco state had functioned as the logistical heart of cocaine distribution across the Western Hemisphere, and in a single synchronized day. Its arteries had been cut one city, one port, one network at a time. As the raids concluded across the continent, the noise of the operation faded. Helicopters lifted away. Doors were sealed. Evidence was boxed and tagged. What followed was not pursuit or confrontation, but something far more final. Investigators turned inward away from weapons, warehouses, and fugitives toward intent, authorship, and command responsibility. Inside secured facilities, forensic teams began assembling the last layer of evidence recovered from the bunker beneath Miraflores Palace. This phase unfolded in silence. No explosions, no sirens, just screens glowing in dark rooms and analysts reading, rereading, and cross-referencing documents that would decide the fate of a government. Encrypted files retrieved from bunker computers carried unmistakable authorization trails. Shipment approvals routed through military-controlled ports. customs exemptions granted in advance, maritime corridors cleared without inspection, profit-sharing schedules allocating fixed percentages to specific accounts month after month, year after year. The language was formal, bureaucratic, almost mundane, but the content was devastating. FBI analysts confirmed what defense attorneys would later be unable to dispute. The approvals were not forged. They were not spoofed. They were not the work of rogue subordinates acting beyond their authority. Each document carried valid credentials, authenticated signatures, and access tokens tied directly to the highest offices of state power. This was not negligence. It was governance. Financial reconstruction followed, and the picture expanded further. DEA investigators working with international partners traced billions of dollars in narcotics proceeds through layers of shell companies nested within shell companies. Corporate structures designed to dissolve accountability while preserving control. Offshore accounts in Panama, Cyprus, and the Caribbean funneled money into real estate portfolios in Miami, Madrid, and Dubai. Luxury condominiums, private villas, commercial properties held through proxies, yachts, aircraft, and high-end vehicles were purchased not merely for indulgence, but as mobile vaults, assets that could move value across borders faster than any wire transfer. Artworks changed hands privately. Insurance policies were leveraged as collateral. Entire wealth management ecosystems existed for one purpose: to turn cocaine into permanence. As the numbers came together, even veteran investigators paused. The scale exceeded anything previously documented. At its peak, the network had moved an estimated 300 tons of cocaine annually, generating revenues exceeding $12 billion per year over a 10-year span. Analysts concluded that more than 1,200 tons had entered global markets through this system. But the most sobering metric was not financial. It was human. Each shipment represented addictions seeded into cities. Each route corresponded with spikes in overdose deaths, gang violence, and systemic collapse far from the origin point. Tens of thousands of lives, mothers, fathers, sons, daughters, had been lost along supply lines protected by state authority. The cost was not abstract. It was counted in emergency room reports, morgue records, and empty seats at kitchen tables. As indictments were drafted, intelligence analysts confirmed something even more chilling. The structure uncovered beneath Miraflores Palace had not been designed to serve a single leader or a single term. Strategic planning files detailed contingency protocols for leadership, change, redundant command nodes to survive arrests, and expansion blueprints for additional underground facilities across the country. The system anticipated disruption and planned for it. This was not a partnership between a state and organized crime. It was a state reorganized around organized crime. Drug revenue had financed political campaigns, paid off judges, bought loyalty within the military and security, the collapse of the regime's command network services, funded propaganda operations designed to shape public perception and suppress dissent. The line between government and cartel had not been blurred, it had been erased. By late January 2026, the final threshold was crossed. The head of state and 14 senior officials were formally placed into federal custody to face prosecution in the United States. The charges were sweeping: narrow terrorism, racketeering, conspiracy to traffic controlled substances, money laundering, and violations carrying mandatory life sentences. There would be no negotiated resolution, no plea agreements, no political compromise. The evidence was exhaustive. The paper trail was